I will call the May 11th Study Commission meeting to order. I have Lori Casey, Cindy Perdue-Dolan, Ben Thielen, Matt Steppen, Raylyn Brando, Dan Dennehy, Chad Silk, and Mary McCormick, and Cindy Shaw is excused for tonight. Can we have our Pledge of Allegiance and prayer, please? Public comment on any item on the agenda? No. And no public comment on anything not on the agenda. We have approval of 3 sets of meeting minutes. Excuse me, I just called for public comment on items on the agenda.
There we go. So I have a letter from the local IFF Local 96 to the Butte-Silver Study Commission on behalf of the International Association of Firefighters Local 96. First, we want to recognize and thank this commission for the tremendous amount of work that has gone into this process over the last year and a half. Excuse me. We appreciate the time you have dedicated to learning about the fire service and listening to concerns from all sides. Over time, we believe many people have come to better understand the hardships and the operational challenges the fire service has been faced with for decades. When individuals are fully informed on these issues, many begin to see the positive direction and structure that Option 2 provides. With that said, we remain deeply concerned about the impacts of Option 1. There are still major questions that have not been clearly answered. First, do all VFDs currently have constitution bylaws in place for the citizens within their district to rely on for basic governance? We understand that rural fire district laws outline organizational requirements, but are all departments meeting those minimum standards? We ask because these documents have been requested for months and very little information has been provided. How long have these requests been made, and what documentation has actually been produced? Second, has any VFD completed a true cost analysis about what it would take to independently operate under a separate special tax levy? Currently operating under the city-county structure provides funding and support for VFD operations. We continue to hear concerns that the Director of Fire Services is not transparent about funding, but that is simply not accurate. The information is public and available to anyone who asks for it. The reality is that every department in Butte-Silver needs additional funding, including the career department. That is not unique to the fire service, but if voters are expected to approve new taxes, citizens deserve to understand exactly what those costs would look like and what benefit they would receive in return. What is the advantage of increasing taxes within the small individual districts for essentially the same emergency services? Another major issue is district boundaries. Over the last several months, we have heard members of VFDs publicly state that they do not believe their district boundaries are accurate, despite departments being asked for the last 3.5 years to provide documentation supporting those boundaries. How can elections be conducted under rural fire district law if there is still disagreement over which district boundaries actually exist? Throughout this entire study commission process, we have consistently heard discussions about efficiency in local government. That is something we value as well, and we believe the community values it too. Yet, under Option 1, we could potentially create a system with 66 different individuals involved in decision-making authority between the 9 volunteer fire departments and the career department. With all due respect, how is that efficient? That is more representatives than exist in the Montana Senate, which helps oversee a multi-billion-dollar state budget. We also have serious concerns about what happens if option 1 passes and voters within a district reject an additional tax levy to fund the VFD. What happens then? Does the department dissolve? Does another district absorb it and increase taxes on its own residents? What happens if that levy also fails? There are simply too many unknowns. If option 1 is placed on the ballot and approved, those structural decisions could remain in place for decades before another opportunity for change exists. No option will ever be perfect, and we understand the difficult position this commission is in. However, we strongly believe option 2 creates the opportunity for consistent standards, accountability, and structure across the entire fire service, regardless of whether someone is career or volunteer. The community would still maintain control through ordinances and resolutions, allowing the system to adapt over time and for as the fire service evolves. Option 2 also ensures VFDs continue to exist within the framework of our charter. But if Butte-Silver funds the department, there must also be accountability and clear authority over how those funds are used. At the end of the day, we simply want the opportunity to see what a more unified and structured fire service could look like, one where career and volunteer members work together to build something this community has never seen before. A fire service that is professional, accountable, coordinated, and most importantly, safe for everyone involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Leibel. Public comment on any item on the agenda?
Is it? There it is. Karen Sargent, 3021 Josephine Street. Having received certain information, like an hour before the meeting, I think that the vote for what should go on the ballot should be tabled until more discussion can be held when it comes to the fire service options. Thank you.
Any other public comment for items on the agenda? Public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission? Okay, so moving on, we have the approval of 3 sets of minutes. We have March 30th, April 27th, and May 4th. We can take them as individual items, or we can group them if there's no questions.
Madam Chair, I move to approve March 30th, April 27th, and May 4th meeting minutes, including the public hearing.
I have a motion from Dennehy and a second from Thielen. Are there any comments or questions regarding any of those notes? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Correspondence and our study commission update. Mr. Enruth and I have been in correspondence with Dan Clark from the MSU Law Center, and so I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away, Mr. Enruth, in regards to what we found out from Mr. Clark.
Good evening, council members and Madam Chairwoman. So Dan Clark finally got back to us. We sent him the draft ballot questions that all of you have in front of you. Commissioner Steppen put all these together. He sent us back an original email with regards to how this needed to be presented to the community. The very first question that you see on the document that's in front of you that Mr. Steppen put together mimics what he sent us back. I had some clarifying questions for him, which was, does this actually have to be on the ballot? And he clarified that as yes. That question number 1 that's on that sheet has to be answered first before the sub-option questions can be voted on. So Butte-Silver County, once this goes to the ballot, will be required to vote for either revising the charter or retaining the existing charter. And then they will be able to go through the rest of it afterwards. Him and I had a very good in-depth discussion about sub-options and the 3 sub-options versus the multiple questions that we have in this document. Him and I, from my understanding, are on the same page with regards to the first 3 questions on this document pertain directly to the form of government, which is how I interpret the statute, how other attorneys have interpreted the statute, and once I explained it to him that way, he believes that that is also a possible, good interpretation of the statute. He did clarify that, however, the Secretary of State could have issue with that, and we may be sent back to the drawing board with our additional questions. But he is of the opinion that that is a correct interpretation. And also, when the Secretary of State has issues with ballot things, they get sent to him, and he makes the decisions. So that makes me feel good. The form of all of these questions, some of them in the sense of form are not correct, but it's a very simple form change. If you look at the very first question, it is in the correct format. You have to have the for adoption issue first, the maintaining issue second. That is statutory. I printed off a copy and brought it with me of the statute itself, just so everybody could see that if you wanted to. They literally lay out in the statute the form of how the question should go. With that being said, he did specifically state that under the firefighters section, we cannot have option 1 and option 2. We have to have a for adoption option or for retaining the existing form option. You only get 2 choices. We are not allowed to put 3 under 1 question. Other than that, he did not have any issues with what we had laid out. He said it looked good, it was clean, it was simple. This will not be the final format. There's a fill in the bubble looking style format that you obviously see on the ballot that these will be drafted into. But for the purposes of tonight, this is a very good starting point for all of you to finish out the final language in these that you would like to see in them. So the first 3 questions were good, and then the rest of them that did not deal with the form of government. As he said, he believed that my interpretation of the statute was correct, but if the Secretary of State had an issue with it, they would let us know.
Okay, so Mr. Unruth, I want to make sure that we have this correct because we've had a lot of discussion about the different options. We've had a lot of back and forth regarding how many things we can do. And so for tonight, it's your recommendation that we go ahead and vote on everything we want to bring forward with the expectation that the Secretary of State is going to find in favor of what you've said in regards to the other things that aren't form of government being allowable.
Madam Chair, that is correct. And my other question to Mr. Clark was that if my interpretation is not correct, how do small forms of government such as ours modify their charter outside of that 10-year window that we have in statute? He did state that there are counties that have passed ordinances that are in accordance with state law that allow for the local governments to modify their charter on the ballot during each election cycle. So for instance, the issue with fire services or neighborhood councils, if Butte-Silver County puts in place an ordinance that states if one of these issues is brought to the council can vote on it, deal with the language, and put it on the ballot for the people in the fall. That does allow for these types of modifications to occur outside of the 10-year window for review that the council is doing right now, which gives me a little bit of hope in the sense of that there were a lot of things that the council was trying to address that aren't even in this document that can actually be brought up again a lot sooner than within 10 years. So it's already spoken with Deputy County Attorney Sean Peterson about this, and we're going to look and pull the Madison County ordinance. I think he said Bozeman, Gallatin County might have had one as well, to be able to, the city of Bozeman might have had one to be able to do that throughout the year to allow for change in the charter if need be. But yes, I recommend voting as you have now with the 3 big questions in the front, and then we'll send off to the Secretary of State, and then if they have any issues with it, I will sit back down with Dan Clark and we will determine what we need to do. But all in all, Dan said it did look good.
Okay, I have another clarifying question, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. So, assuming that we're moving through everything with our Section 4 fire services governance, you said we can't have option 1 and option 2, but could they be separate questions, meaning vote for retaining the charter as is or for changing it to option 1, and then a second question for retaining the charter or for option 2?
Chairwoman Brendel, I actually thought of that myself, is if we could split it into 2 questions. I do not believe you can, because you're going to have the same maintain option in each one, and then technically both of the options could win. So you could have option 1 win and option 2 win if it's a split question. I thought of that myself, or on how to draft the internal one, but realistically speaking, it appears that we can only do option 1, adopt whatever the council votes on tonight, and option 2 is maintaining it as it is.
Okay. Commission, I understand this is frustrating. We've been on the option 1, option 2 language for a long time. And, you know, our direction from county attorney and what we didn't hear from Dan Clark was, you know, he did not respond to us for quite a long time. So I apologize on behalf of all of us, I suppose, that this is where we're at tonight. I did go back and kind of look through notes and look at our deliberations, and we were running with the assumption we could run both ballot questions. So at this time, I just know that is a little bit of a blow to our thinking. I have some hope in regards to ordinances, an ordinance being able to be passed by the existing Council of Commissioners to be able to bring forward issues to the ballot every 2 years instead of a 10-year ballot. So I guess I'll open it up for other questions for Mr. and Ruth at this time. Ms. Casey, and then I'll take you, Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be a stupid question, but if on the primary question, if you vote for retaining the existing charter, do you complete the other questions and vote as a voter or not?
Commissioner Casey, technically you can, yes, but if for retaining the charter form of government exceeds the 50%, if it wins, the rest of the questions are invalidated. If they don't, no, you're requesting to retain that specific charter form. Yes, I do believe their votes will still be counted if they vote in the other sections. And this was another concern I had with Mr. Clark, was when I read this question, I have a problem with it because it doesn't say go to the next one. And I asked him if we can draft it that way, and he said no. He said this is the language, and he sent it to us. This is verbatim what the first question has to be. And he said it is on us, the council and local government's responsibility to educate the public on what this means. That if you wish to have modifications in the charter, you vote for option number 1 and then pick your modifications. If you wish to retain the charter as it exists, you vote for option 1, and as you can see in the other questions, if the revised charter is adopted. If the revised charter is adopted. So that is not a stupid question. It was one I had this morning.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank
I'll
you,
take
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Steppen.
So my question is, I just want to kind of drill down on when did you contact Dan Clark about the fire options initially, and what was the span of time before? And I'm guessing we got the answer today. So
He called this morning.
he called this morning. Okay, this morning. So when did we initially ask him the question about option 1, option 2? Because we've spent a year and a half A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of sweat equity went into this. And we've taken a lot of hits personally with doing this in the fire subcommittee. So I really want to know when we initially reached out to Dan Clark to get, and I still don't think we're concrete on it either, but when did we do that? Thanks.
Mr. Clark was originally contacted months ago. He never responded. He responded here at the beginning of May with the original questions that we proposed, that we sent over. And then after I emailed him a couple of times and called him last week that said, I really need to speak with you. I have questions, particularly on the first part of this. Then he called back this morning and we went through it. He's never been specifically asked the fire option question. He was just contacted with regards to how we need to draft this, and that was the questions that he answered this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So could we get a copy of the email that you sent to him originally, and what that looked like, what your
She
question
sent it.
is? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I believe
Could you
Chairman
send that
Reynolds
to
did.
us?
I forwarded, you were all CC'd on the
Oh, okay.
email contacts, and then the first contact we made with Mr. Clark was in February. And then we followed up, and then Mr. Enruth also followed up, I believe, with emails and phone calls that were just, I need to speak with you.
Okay, so then since February,
Trying.
we've been working on just assumption.
We've been working on what we thought was correct, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Steppen, you had a question as well. Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is regarding the information that pertains to putting a question on the ballot, regardless if there's a study commission or not. And maybe I just didn't see, is there something in our charter that allows us to do that? Or is that in MCA, in our charter, refers to MCA that allows us to do that? Do we need to add something to our charter to make sure we're doing it lawfully, to edit the charter, not just during a study commission period?
Commissioner Silk, my understanding from Mr. Clark this morning was that's codified in code. So then a county or city can place in their charter, or not in their charter, in ordinance, a way to modify the charter that can then go, it's got to be a ballot initiative though. It cannot be voted on by council. It has to be voted on by the people. So, for instance, the two main points that stick out for modifying charters are based off of citizen petition or study commission petition. And then I was speaking with Dan this morning, and I said that doesn't make sense to me with regards to the 10 years. And he said, no, that's when counties and cities can place in ordinance their own ability to modify the charter, but it has to be a ballot initiative.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just a general question to anybody who might know the answer. I don't remember, and it could be just my age, that when we were given the initial briefing about being a study commissioner and our role ahead and what we needed to accomplish, I don't recall, and I'm guessing for the last 20 years, Butte-Silver has not understood that you could change the charter every 2 years or do something with a ballot initiative. This is news to me. I'm kind of shocked that we're learning this today. And any insights on that would be great from anyone.
And my insights specifically from Dan Clark this morning, I always thought it was not ballot initiative, citizen petition or study commission. And he this morning said no. And that's how I read the statute too, is the two. Ms. Commissioner Dolan, I'm of the same opinion, was of the same opinion you are.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sorry. I just want to follow up and ask, so it is, okay, so you're saying earlier Madison County, Gallatin County, they have used that process between the 10-year periods, and successfully or even unsuccessfully, just the option of doing a ballot initiative, citizen-driven, versus waiting the whole 10 years for the study commission.
That is correct, Commissioner Dolan. Specifically, he gave the example that they modified their charter to a certain amount of commissioners, I believe is what Dan said, and they didn't like it. And so they didn't have to wait the 10 years. They had the ability to come in between and modify it back.
Thank you.
Ms. Casey?
I assume that they had that already in their ordinance, where Butte-Silver currently doesn't, but that would be something that maybe, as a county attorney's office, you'd work with the council to put that ordinance in place?
Correct. Commissioner Casey, I already specifically asked Dan. That's why I asked about Madison County, who did it, so we can model after it.
Mr. Denny?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Matt, are we thinking about the ballot question in terms specifically for the fire service government? You're saying that we can't have option one or option two. It has to be continuing, what it looks like now versus what can be proposed to the voters. Are we saying that since that option one and two cannot be on the ballot, there's another option which would be put it on the ballot at the same time this is running in November? So that'd be a separate question, or do we have to wait 2 years or have the ordinance created?
Commissioner Denny, I think that would be more of a time-sensitive question on whether or not what Mr. Clark has informed me of is a proper and correct way to do things, which Sean and I are looking at in conjunction with getting it passed and then getting something on the ballot. What I'm saying is when he looked at our question today, he said we have to have option number one as adopt whatever the council decides on tonight, and option number two is maintain the existing charter. It also doesn't have to be on the ballot. It can be tabled as well.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My biggest concern with this, with the fire options, is had we known that we were only allowed to put one option and then like this saying status quo, or however the verbiage is for maintain what we have now. And of course, you can always look back with 20/20 vision, but we as a fire subcommittee could have coalesced and almost forced the volunteer and the careers to actually get together and come up with a viable option that both sides could work with, and that could bring forward that something to the effect of a combination, what we're looking at now, option one and option two, come up with some viable option that's different than what's currently done because of the veto of House Bill 547. And I know that there were some additions that the fire chief did for option two, great, but option one, I mean, I'm really super frustrated the fact that we weren't given this information to have a viable discussion and to really sit down with saying, hey guys, we have one option that we can only give to the voter other than status quo. Now we're in a pickle because we are at the end of the line here, and what do we do now? This is really frustrating. Thanks.
I agree. This is really difficult, and it feels like, it feels like we're at an impasse now, and that, this commission has worked extremely hard to try to bring something forward to make changes happen and help our community move forward in this regard. Mr. Thielen, you have a question.
You know, I know time restraints and all that, but is it too late to redo it? That, you know, option one, option two, can't we reword that to make it work?
Mr. Enruth?
The question would be is what do you want to reword it to? So you've got two very diverse groups of people, one that wants a specific option and another that has a specific option. The current charter is actually what I think what you would end up with if you proposed putting the two together. The volunteers, you know, are stating that they have their own taxing authority still based off of the Attorney General's opinion. And then the career department, you know, technically you're overlapping right now. That's where it would happen. So based off of my research with regards to, you know, when city counties consolidated, that's why the charter had to be specific on whether or not volunteer firefighters were brought in under the full guise of, you know, the full authority of the county, taxing and operational, so you didn't have those combined issues. Because right now the volunteers are not collecting taxes through their special levies. Technically they've pseudo agreed to collect their money from the county. There's a budgetary process that all of them are supposed to be following, and it's like a 2 or 3 step process. So right now you have that kind of combined overlapping where volunteers still have budgetary authority, but they're going through Butte-Silver to deal with that. And then the operational control is split currently between how it's working. My understanding is a split between the career department and the volunteer department and the different chiefs. Having a combined, again, is what Commissioner Purdue-Dolan was stating, was putting them to the table and making them work that out and determining what their roles are going to be. So realistically speaking, it's kind of sitting that way right now. Is if it was kept at a status quo or kept at what the charter states, that's could force them back to the table, but that's up to them. My understanding right now is those are all just kind of up in the air.
So kind of like herding cats, right?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Mr. Steppen?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that I understand. So question 1 gives the option to keep the charter the same or make revisions to the charter, right? The primary question.
That's the second part. The first question has to follow the statute, which is for the adoption of. Then the second question is retaining the charter as is.
Okay, so, and then you can continue to vote even if your choice is to keep the charter the same, right? And,
Yes.
and so that I'm just talking out loud so that I can articulate and understand this. Because if you choose to retain the existing form of charter, but that is not the prevailing vote, your vote still counts in the other areas. So you're essentially saying, but if my
Yes.
preference doesn't happen, I still have a say in.
Yes, correct.
So, and this is reaching then, but that option to retain the charter form of government can't serve as the status quo option in any of the furthering questions, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I'm also super frustrated for a number of reasons on this, because having 2 options served a really strong purpose in that the way that vote may have went was decided by the people, right? Not the commission.
That is correct, but
Would-
your 2 options make you deciding it. You have to have a maintain language question, or you've already made the decision to change it.
So you're saying we're taking authority to change the charter without a vote of the people saying you can change the charter.
Correct. You
Even
have
though-
to give them the
even though-
option to maintain the language.
even though the primary question asks that question.
Yes, because the primary question is asking them if they want to modify the charter in general.
Okay.
Then you're asking them the specifics. So even though one individual may want to modify the charter with respect to the first 3 questions, 4 questions, they may not want to modify it under 6. You have to give them the option to maintain the current language. Otherwise, you have made that decision for them as the council, and that was some specifics we got into this morning as well, that as the committee, as the council, you cannot choose that for them. You cannot force them to modify the charter. They have to be able to retain the language in it under each specific question. That's why the statutory provision is there with regards to how the question has to be asked.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, so in section 1, Matt, if the prevailing vote is for retaining the existing charter form of government, section 2 and section 3, whatever the vote is, it's moot.
Correct.
So,
That's why I don't like question 1.
right, so the only way to move forward is if the voters vote for the adoption of the revised form of government proposed by us,
Yes.
and then you can move your way down the ballot, and that will be, from your perspective and Clark's perspective, fine. So those votes count. But if we don't do that, if the voter says, no, let's retain the existing, it's moot. There's, no, that's just, they don't count then. So I guess that's how it was designed from whoever, the legislature or the state or the Constitution, but that's not really giving the power of the people to vote. And so, I get it, there's nothing we can do with it. There's some questions that we are answered that I guess I have to say that I'm equally as frustrated as my colleagues. I would hope, I guess the public relations that Shauna's going to have to do is please vote for the adoption of the revised charter. And then we can move through that. If the public doesn't understand that or they want to retain it, then everything we've done is moot. We've done nothing. The charter goes in, and we haven't, we kept on getting on our soapbox and say, for 20 years we haven't done anything. We have to do something. And if people don't understand that question, we're not going to do it again. And that seems to be not your fault, not anyone's fault, but it's a frustrating sort of idea after spending so much time and talking to my colleagues, and they are doing so much work. And the chair has tried to keep us going forward in a very hard understanding, and it could all be for naught if retaining the existing charter government is voted for. So, yeah, it's very frustrating in terms of that. Thank you for my rant.
Mr. Thielen?
So I agree with everything that Dan said, but I want to back up a little bit. So if I understood you right, if you check with Madison County and it can be changed by ordinance, then it's on the commissioners to change it, which they should have done 20 years ago. Is that correct?
My understanding from this morning with speaking with Dan Clark is yes, is that counties have the option of putting in place an ordinance that allows for modifications of the charter on the ballot. And like I said, Sean and I haven't got to fully deep dive into it, but that's what we were informed of this morning.
Well, hopefully somewhere we can figure out where it comes and lands on its feet here, I hope.
Well, and again, that's why I was trying to contact Dan, multiple times, was this first question, the way it's worded, it's difficult. And but he said, yes, the citizens have to vote for modifying their charter, and then they vote underneath it for what they want to modify.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, going back to, and I'll just make a comment, and I agree, I'm glad Mr. Dennehy said what he did, because I think about 20 years ago, or probably more than that, some folks have asked me that question about, well, we had a question years ago on a study commission, and it was all or nothing. It was everything in one basket. And for a year and a half, every person that has asked that question of me, I have said, oh, no, we are doing great pains to do this on making sure that each thing is itemized and clear as crystal as much as we can to make it, not legalese and not, just to obscure the wordage or the verbiage with a particular ballot issue or question, that it was going to be, we were very meticulous in that, knowing our history. And we didn't want to put everything in one basket and just say yes or no, and then the sub-questions, because of that, because it could just make the whole thing moot, and why did we go through the bother of it? But more importantly, I want to ask the question about the fire options, and if we don't have time to redo and come up with a better option to present to the voter, and then the other option is retain the status quo. That option, I hate to say this out loud because it's so frustrating, but if in fact we get clarification that we can change the charter in 2 more years, I'd hate to punt this yet again for 2 more years. But I'll tell you, I am not in favor of the way things are written today, option 1 and 2, picking one of those, because it takes out either group from what we've tried to accomplish with regard to fairness. Just complete fairness of, you have an opportunity, to what Mr. Steppen said, giving it to the voters and the taxpayers who pay all these bills, the opportunity to choose their form of government and everything underneath it, the opportunity every 10 years to make those decisions, because again, they pay the bills. I'm really struggling, but if push comes to shove, I'd much rather not give folks an option that's not clear, that we haven't had time to discuss and debate, and provide the career firefighters and Mr. Leibel to come up and the volunteers to come up and give their input for maybe a better option. But if we don't have time to do that now, what do? Do we now just take it out and say, well, we're going to punt it to the Council of Commissioners and they can do it every 2 years? And I'm guessing, well, I'm not going to guess. Mr. Henruth, so what's the time frame then if we were to say, take out the fire, let's work on it and do it through ordinance, resolution, or whatever in 2 years, so we don't have to wait the next 10? I'm just at a loss as to figure out how we do this, but what do you think?
Can you ask your question again?
I'm sorry.
I
Thank
think
you, Madam Chair.
I think I understand.
What's that time frame look like?
For passing an ordinance?
Well, to do the 2-year version that we're learning tonight.
From my understanding is simply the Butte-Silver County Commissioners would have to pass the ordinance if they chose to do so, and then it would be available for modifying on the next election cycle.
So it'd be 2 years from now,
Yeah, because I
in
don't.
2028.
Yeah, I don't believe
Okay.
we would have enough time for this summer.
Okay.
Only if they choose to pass the ordinance, otherwise it stays the same.
That is correct.
Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the Council of Commissioners, if we put an option on the ballot that said Butte-Silver Bow will run the fire service through ordinance, would option 1 and option 2 still be able to move forward? I'm trying to think out loud here. Can council commissioners not pass an ordinance fast enough to put option 1 and option 2 on the ballot? I know our deadline is close to July, but for the November election, can we not pass a ballot that allows the Council of Commissioners to put something on the ballot in November?
Commissioner Silk, you run into the same problem though with option 1 and option 2. They have to present the option to the people in the same manner as modifying a charter as this commission does, which is you have to have a maintain option and then a specific option to what you want to modify.
Thank you.
And no, they would not have enough time.
I'll take Ms. McCormick and then you, Mr. Steppen.
Well, could we do something like we did with the neighborhood councils, where we say the Council of Commissioners will develop an ordinance for new policies and procedures for the fire departments? Because I think there's problems, I think, with, when I look at kind of what has been proposed for the volunteers, there's definitely some really obvious legal issues there. If we turned it over to the council to work on this, I really do think that, I don't know, it's like our leaders have not come forward and addressed this issue in an appropriate manner, I don't think. And it's fallen to us. And that, it's big and it's complex and it's gnarly and there's so many different things going on. It would be nice to have, I think we have given it such a strong, good faith effort, so much time has gone in and talking to people and listening to people, but it's still a confusing situation. And I would like to see Butte-Silver leadership step in and take the initiative and for them to start working on this problem in a really proactive way where they bring in paid and volunteer on an equal basis. And it's not the fire council guys that are the commissioners who make fun of volunteers making decisions, that everybody sit down and really think about what we can do to work together. And could we have our option be to have the Butte-Silver Council of Commissioners develop an ordinance for this structure of the fire services in the city-county?
Mr. Enruth.
Chairman Brando, Commissioner McCormick, we already have that. That's actually what's in place right now. And that's the problem because state law is specific. It specifically protects volunteer fire departments from being governed by ordinance unless expressly stated in the charter. Excuse me, I said that incorrectly. It does not allow for charters to state that they can be governed by ordinances. They either are governed by state law or they're fully incorporated in, including all taxing and operational authority. Right now, that's actually how the charter is written. That states that they will, through ordinance, set it up.
Mr. Steppen.
I may be asking the same question that others are and beating a dead horse here. But I'm trying to go to the goal and work backwards. And I'm thinking of this, so stay with me, and what lands us in a place where the two options can be decided upon by the people, right? Is there an avenue where the question that goes on the ballot is keeping the charter language as is, or revising the charter language through a further process that can be voted upon in the next primary Do you understand what I'm getting at here?
Next fall election, yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to find if there's a way that gets us to that binary option that we're looking for.
So I asked the question if it could be combined, such as option one is, option one is going to be the adopt, option two is maintain the current language in the charter. My question was option one, removal of the volunteers, because they're two totally diverse things, it makes it 3 questions. And that's where, realistically speaking, I think you could present it to the Secretary of State and ask that, the worst case scenario is they come back and they tell you no. But based off of it this morning is you have to have that status quo question. Maintain the charter as it reads, and based off of the fire services question, they're just 2 different things. I don't mean to simplify them, but for simplistic purposes, one is removing the volunteers from the charter, 2 is just modifying the charter language so that the county has full control. They're 2 totally different things, so it is 3 questions. So really, it would almost have to be presented in 2 different cycles. Is one, does Butte-Silver County wish to remove the volunteers from the current charter or maintain the language? And then in the next cycle, if that doesn't pass, modify the language. You could present it that way, in my opinion, based off of what Mr. Clark said this morning. But again, there's no real way to combine the 2 options. It's not the same as if we look at the commissioners, where we want to reduce the commissioners to 4 and theoretically change their terms to 6, where those kind of mesh together. These 2 don't. They're just 2 divergent options.
I'll take you, Ms. Dolan, and then I'll take you, Mr. Silk.
Just a comment and a question. So my comment is, being on the Council of Commissioners, we tried with the Fire Advisory Board. In the years that I was on it, I was never on the Fire Advisory Board. Other commissioners were, and I think some of them testified during all of our stuff, Mr. Sorich, Mr. Olson, both former commissioners. And it strikes me that punting it to them when the course of 45 years, they haven't figured it out. But I don't think we understood, I can just talk for myself as a former commissioner, that the 2 years was even an option. It was always going to, we have to wait for the study commission. We have to really change our charter. And then I want to actually go way back to the beginning of this conversation. When you talked to Mr. Clark this morning, what in the world was his response, or did you ask him what the heck took him so long? If we asked this question in February, and I know, again, I'm beating the deadest horse possible, but I want to know why, if he's in charge of study commissions across the state, and we had this integral question, and we have spent 18 months working on it, and then come to find out today that we can't do what we're doing? What did he give an answer as to why he just blew us off for all these months?
I don't think he necessarily, Chairwoman Randall, Commissioner Dolan, I can't answer that question. I know that we tried contacting him multiple times, but again, I don't know if you answered the question yourself, that he is helping all the other governments across the state. And there's a lot of them. Bozeman's got 2 itself, Billings has got 2, ours is combined, Helena's got 2. Just within the surrounding areas, there's 6. From the conversation this morning, he was talking about all of the things that Bozeman's got going on. It sounds like that takes up a substantial amount of time. My guess is simply that, like the rest of us, he's a government worker that's got more on his plate than he can handle and not enough people to help.
Well, to quickly follow up, I would love you to reach out to him or our chairman to ask him that pointed question, because I'd like an actual answer. And I'm sorry, I work in the federal government, and my plate is super full. But if you have time-sensitive issues, I'd like an answer to that, because he has really thrown a real wrench into all of this. And I just think he needs to answer to Butte-Silver and to our community as to why, even if he had to delegate it to somebody to come up with an answer, a substantial answer moving forward, that we could work with. I mean, had we known back in February, we could have changed everything with regard to our subcommittee and how the direction we were going, because we were under the impression option 1, option 2, and status quo.
Yeah.
So I'd like that answer.
And again, that's how I read the statute, is those sub-options can have that option. So again, it could be simply differing opinions, but we contacted him, tried calling him. He got back to us today when I emailed him last week and said, I really need some answers.
Excuse me, Ms. Dolan, I would like to just go ahead and give us a couple of points here. So, my first reach out was April of 2025. Then we did it again in, July of 25, November of 25, and then February, and then most recently in April. Those questions are a little different, but I think all of them say ballot language, a number of ballot questions. However, one of the things that I looked at was our materials. You know, when we did our training materials do have this language in them. And it says you have to have this primary question and then the following questions. Our questions were about how many of those options we could have. So in some regards, you know, the responsibility lies here with this chair as well. Mr. Enruth gave us the advice on the 2 options being allowed, and so we rolled with that. And we thought that was going to be, you know, the way it could be done. I am equally as frustrated as you are, Ms. Dolan. This is hard. You know, we haven't done this for 20 years, so there's no institutional knowledge in the building either that we can rely on. And we've done our best. As I see it with this particular, thank you, Ms. Shaw, for joining. Appreciate you. With this particular issue, it looks like we kind of have 4 paths forward. The first path is to table this and leave it off the ballot completely. The second is to vote for, you know, we could vote for option 1 to go on the ballot with the generic language. The third would be we can vote for option 2 to go on the ballot with the generic language of retaining the charter. And then the fourth is to, I think Mr. Enruth, you said we could try it as it is and vote for that to go forward and see if the Secretary of State rejects it. Do I have that correct, Mr. Enruth, in the fourth?
That's correct. And again, like I said, when tell us no, you know, I mean, you can present it, because when you look at the packets we got, and when I look at the case law, there are things that are written that way. That's why I said it. So to have him, I mean, and obviously I was always of the opinion that the status quo, the maintained option always has to be on there, and the other 2 have to pass via majority vote. So you could end up with one or the other or both. But it appeared that we could do that way. And so, yes, I agree, it's frustrating. But yes, those are 4 options with regards to that. I would say that we would work a little bit on just the language themselves. I have my notes with me if that was what the council chose to do so tonight.
I'll take Mr. Dennehy and I'll come back.
Madam Chair, members of the council, could there be a 5th option, Matt? And I'm just kind of adding on to what Commissioner Steppen has said, having the language where the status quo language, you will have the existing language. Could we have the people of this community have language saying for mandating the Council of Commissioners to decide the question of changing the charter language pertaining to the fire department organizational structure? Could the people vote for mandating the Council of Commissioners to do something within a certain amount of time? Is that a different question? This way, I think having option 1 leaves out the career volunteer or career fire department. Having option 2 leaves out the volunteer fire department's sort of questions of how do we vote, and that's why we came up with option 1 and 2 to have the people vote. And I think it was a very good option at the end of the day. But if we can't do that, we have to either pick option 1 or option 2 and status quo, then we might want to say, well, Council of Commissioners, we are mandating you to come up with an answer regarding this question in a relatively short time and have the question finally put to rest. I don't know if that's option 5, or I'm just talking out of my ear here, so. Could that be an option?
Commissioner Dennehy, I don't know the answer to your question, but if I think about how it would work, Commissioner Dolan's probably heard this term before. It feels almost like an unfunded mandate. Exactly, where you're mandating an elected body to do something, but if they don't do it, there's no repercussions. There's no nothing. In the end, you're demanding them to do that. The people themselves do have that power, though. They can vote with, on who they want as their commissioners. So I think that is there. But yes, I think if you put a question on the ballot that's the piece that the citizens could vote on, that said the Butte-Silver County Commissioners are required to do X, I feel like it's going to have all kinds of issues. And then even on the back end, whether or not they do it within the time frame, there's no repercussions for it. There's no removal from office. There's no anything like that. So realistically, I do appreciate the thought process behind that, but I don't think it's viable.
Ms. Dolan, then I'll take you, Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if we could, and I like the fact that you itemized those out. I'm wondering if we could vote to table temporarily a vote on option 1 and option 2, because I would like to see us not just call the Secretary of State. I would like to have a meeting with the Secretary of State's office and sit down with them and explain. It's a lot harder to talk with someone face to face and not on the phone and say, listen, we have spent 18 months working on this. We have, and to have, Chad there and to say, this is, can give the background of all of it, and they're well aware of House Bill 547 and the veto. This has gone on so long that if you can make the case as our county attorney to say, this is how it reads to me, to make that argument, I think it would behoove us on behalf of our community to sit down with them and say, can this be a viable option to do option 1, option 2, status quo, do the 3, in this particular case, because it's not run-of-the-mill, do you want Park and Rec to stay in the charter or to be an independent department? So I would hope that maybe that might be an option. I don't know.
Chairman Moreno, Commissioner Dolan, then I don't want to table it. I want to write it out tonight. I want everybody to be on the same page with the language and have the option there. I actually don't see any problem with the council moving forward with the vote to place it. Well, technically, yes, I would hold off on a vote to place it on the ballot, but I do think you can vote tonight on how you would like it to read, so that way when it is possibly presented to them, this is identical. This is what we want to present. Option 1, 2, or maintain, because there's no other way. There's just simply no other way to present it outside of removing one of the options. So if that is within, that is something that the council wants to do, I would suggest that the council work through your other questions and vote on them and get them done, and then let me, while you're voting and working on those, get the language in these two right to where I think it should be, and then allow for a vote on that to be, and send it to them. And I don't have a problem with that at all, because again, I keep going through in my head, I don't know how you ask the question without asking the multiple options, unless obviously they weren't, one of them didn't get a full vote or the other one didn't get a full vote. That's up to the council. But in order to ask it the way the council has been presenting it, I don't have a problem with that. But I just think if you guys wanted to work on your other section, I could work on that language, and because I already have my notes with me, and then vote on that at the end.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of wanted to go back to what Mary said in her statement, because I feel the same way. I don't think this administration has done very much to work with either group. And just from our knowledge, and I don't say that disrespectfully, but the option could be that we do not put it on the ballot, and they do by ordinance. They don't have to place option 1 or option 2 on the ballot. They could work together and come up with something that resolves this without throwing everything out. It's right now we kind of got the opposite ends. It's all or nothing kind of with the two different options and voting for them. If the council passes the ordinance to be able to change the charter, they can work with both groups and come up with maybe one viable option for the voters to choose. Because we did listen to and took public comment from Commissioner Fisher, who didn't like either option. But he didn't really have any language to give us for that. But, you know, I feel the same as Mary does. I think they punted to this study commission, and I don't think they've been very helpful from the administrative side to, and I'm talking about both the legislative and executive branches coming forward to help us figure this out either.
Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only other thing that I can think of, it would be great for the community to decide the fate of the fire service, and not just in a charter, but through ordinance. Is there a possibility to have the fire service run, to give the community the option to have Butte-Silver Bow run its fire service through ordinance, just by adding it to Section A? There shall be a fire department which shall be composed of the fire department, volunteer fire departments in the city, county, that will be run through ordinance. And through the ordinance language, the community gets a vote through the the Council of Commissioners to structure the fire department so it's a living document and we don't get stuck with something like this in the charter again. Because the law reads, unless specifically stated in charter, if we specifically state that Butte-Silver Bow is in charge of its fire service, that is an ongoing living document where things can change and adapt over time, where rules and laws can be set, not just in the charter, but how Butte-Silver Bow sees fit through ordinance. That should be a possibility to run it through ordinance with my limited background in law.
Commissioner Silk, you are correct. However, the charter has to be specific on the volunteers. The state law is very, very clear on that. Literally to the point, it's actually stated in like 4 different sections of the code where that law is repeated, that the charter has to be specific on what is happening with volunteer fire departments in a consolidated city-county government. So the charter has to state what happens to the volunteers. So yes, theoretically, it could be passed that reflects kind of more of option 2, that all fire services will be under the authority of Butte-Silver Bow County, including both career and volunteer departments, and run by ordinance. Yes, that's possible, but the charter has to be clear on the volunteers, and that's where the Attorney General's opinion has come in, is that Butte-Silver Bow County's charter specifically states that BSB will be running both of them, but it's silent on the taxing issue, on the budgetary issue. And that's why that opinion says what it says, is volunteers have retained their budgetary authority pursuant to the Attorney General's opinion because the charter is silent on it. So that's where the language in option 2 has to come in and be very clear, is that this is what's happening with the volunteers, that Butte-Silver Bow County is essentially absorbing them, taking over full operational control and budgetary and taxing authority. If it doesn't state those things, then it doesn't have that power. Now, it does not have to state exactly how it's going to do those things, but it has to state that it has that power. So yes, you are correct. It could all be run via ordinance and changed via ordinance, but the document still has to be clear on what is happening with the volunteer departments.
Follow up, Madam Chair, thank you.
Mr. Silk.
And that's where I was going with this is, if the Council of Commissioners decides that they want rural fire districts where the rural volunteer fire districts are currently, they can decide that through ordinance, correct?
Yes, if the charter is specific on the volunteers, that the volunteers were brought in and the county now has full operational and budgetary authority.
Which is essentially option 2 as we
Yes,
have
it
it
is
written.
it is option 2.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, as everyone's talking, I think that we have tried in our listening sessions, again, to go back to and try and explain to folks and all the people that came to our listening sessions, which were great, especially the one in Butte, at the brewery, lots of people in the survey. If we go back now and try and do language that says ordinance, resolutions, I don't think our community, with the engagement I remember in our in the Council of Commissioners, a lot of folks don't even know what an ordinance is. They don't know how the process works. And throwing these words at them on a ballot to say, you know, whatever, and go through ordinance, we need to explain that. We need to educate folks, and we don't have the bandwidth or the capacity at this point in time to go back and say, well, in this option, we'll punt it to the Council of Commissioners. And I agree, I'm glad Lori said what she did, and Mary as well. You know, it's tough having the council say 10 years, study commission, deal with the charter, and now we have new information every 2 years possibly, but trying to explain to folks in the weeds about how the process works for the Council of Commissioners would be a very heavy lift at this point. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
I have a comment, and then I'll take you, Mr. Dennehy. Sure. I think I'm seeing our pathway, and so I think, you know, like we said, we have those 4 sort of ways forward. If the Secretary of State rejects the hybrid language, option 1 and option 2, if that's the direction this commission decides to go, then it does have to punt to council, I think. It has to punt to them with the recommendation that they pass the ordinance to start working on it, and then give themselves that 2-year timeline to get it together. And I agree with my colleagues that the reason it's 50 years later is because every administration has punted it down the field. And so we need to be, I think I'm using the wrong words, huh, Mr. Steppen? I don't know. So I'm very bad at football analogies. But we need to, in our recommendations, in our language, we need to make sure that we ask for that resolution or that ordinance to go forward and that they take action. Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, can I suggest requesting Matt to go back and do what he has said to do, is having the status quo question, option 1 question, option 2 question, have him put it in his legal verbiage and bring it back to us to submit that to the Secretary of State for her up or down vote. If it comes back up, we move that forward. If it comes back down, or she decides that is not the proper language, then I think we should do what you're requesting, is to not punt, but maybe a fake punt, and give it to the people who know how to throw a ball, and let them decide the question, and that's the Council of Commissioners. But I would suggest that Matt takes a shot of putting his words to the Secretary of State and see what happens. If she decides that this is not how the question should be posed to the general public and to the voters, then we'll have to have option. We would have to make another decision as a commission.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for being late. I just arrived from Missoula. So, whew. But anyway, I wanted to get back, and I know I might have missed this already. I like that idea, Dan, because it takes that off the table. we know that's not going to happen, and then we can go forward. I think that's probably the easiest route to go with an actual definite answer. What is our timeline like right now? I just was curious, how does that play into all of this if we try to do things outside of the box?
Yeah, we
Thanks.
need to we're on the clock, Ms. Shaw, because we need to get the questions to the secretary in order to get our opinion back to meet that June deadline. July 7th is our deadline for our report to be published. And so that mid-June is when the questions need to be affirmed. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, County Attorney Enruth, can you, and I appreciate what Mr. Dennehy said, can you craft, I guess I have two questions. One is, looking at the verbiage tonight on page 2 of the document you gave us for option 1 and 2 for fire, I think those are very clear and concise. Do you believe that your language will change much from what we're reading, option 1 and 2 tonight? And can we look at the language you craft before you send it to the Secretary of State?
If you guys want to work on your other stuff, I'll go do it right now.
Yeah, that's, I thought, was our direction. So if we could, we'll excuse Mr. Enruth to go work on the language, and then we can start working our way through the other questions if we're ready for that, for our new business. We're in that part of the agenda. Okay, are we ready for that? Okay.
I'll be back.
Thank you, Mr. Enruth. All right, so we have our section 1, the primary question. I don't think that needs a vote, as we know it's required by our law. And so section 2, the executive structure, the question reads, if revised charter is adopted, how should the executive branch be structured? Vote for 1, maintain the existing structure with an elected chief executive, or 2, adopt a city-county manager form of government with an appointed manager and an elected mayor serving as the presiding officer of the Council of Commissioners. Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if that, we could, if it'd be worth it to reword the second proposal just a little bit, to adopt a city-county manager form of government with an appointed manager and a mayor elected at large serving as presiding officer of the Council of Commissioners. So get the at-large in there. Instead of elected mayor, say mayor elected at large as presiding officer.
Okay, that's one suggestion. Any other suggestions or comments? I know there was other comments regarding the mayor word itself. And so want to open that discussion as well. Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, through our discussion, there seemed to be a little confusion if the voters in section 2 maintain the existing structure as the elected chief executive. And one of the questions, or several questions, says, well, why do we have an elected chief executive and an elected mayor? That seems to be redundant, and it seems to be a little bit over the top. My suggestion would be maybe not use the word mayor, maybe chair is more appropriate. I think someone in our discussion on the commission thought of that too. That mayor seems to be redundant in terms of chief executive and mayor. Maybe it's chief executive and chair. Just what I heard from some of the public comment that we have. If the other option is voted on, having a city-county manager appointed by the Council of Commissioners, then maybe mayor is okay at large, elected at large. But if things don't happen that way, then I think the mayor issue would be confusing. Just my thoughts.
Ms. Dolan? Then I'll take you, Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. I actually think that's a great idea, Mr. Dennehy, change it to chair, because that was confusing to a lot of people, and in conversation and with all of the reach we did. But I'd also throw it out too, to say maybe city county administrator, so they know more that that's the person, the day-to-day operational person. But in either way, but I just thought I'd add that as a possible too. But I like the idea of elected chair of the and presiding officer of the council. That would make it clearer that it's in the legislative branch versus the executive. And I think one of the charges we were able to do is try and make the options to the public a more balanced approach between the executive and the legislative branch.
Ms. McCormick? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. How about mayor/chair? I mean, that way, because we're using the word mayor throughout all these things that we're doing. And right after that, I didn't get this, but okay. Right after, if it's elected mayor/chair serving as presiding officer, that way you know they're one and the same. I don't know if that adds any confusion, but we will have a mayor, and we'll talk about a mayor forever after that. That actually is the presiding officer, but he's at large and does other functions. So I don't know. What do you think?
I'll take Ms. McCormick and then Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Steffen. Mayor is standard. I mean, it's what all kinds of communities do across Montana that have city county managers or managers and in other places. So to me, it is a little confusing, but I think people will get used to it. I think we've made it into a stumbling block that it's really not. But to me, to have it be the chair, that implies it's a, I don't know, why don't we just have reduced to 5 commissioners elected by districts and have 5 districts and have the council pick their chair?
Good point, Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I bet we're thinking the same thing here, but I think there's more responsibilities to this position than presiding over council, right? And so I think one of the reasons why we chose mayor is because that's your representative to the state government in certain situations. So for that reason, I think it's important that the word mayor, along with the work we've done to try and educate, I think it's important that that word is used for that reason.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree with Matt, and also the mayor has specific duties outlined in state law. And I think in other instances, we've seen confusion when we go against something that's different in state law. So I would suggest we stay with the same terminology as state law.
Thank you, Ms. Casey, with the bullet point on that. So I have a couple of suggested changes from our folks, and then I would entertain a motion depending on what we get with the suggested changes. But we had adopt a city county administrator versus manager. I think, again, state law, it says manager, doesn't it? So let's stick with manager if I unilaterally just make that decision for us. So adopt a city county manager form of government with an appointed manager as an elected mayor, elected at-large mayor? How did you say that? As a mayor elected at large, serving as the presiding officer of the Council of Commissioners. Okay, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt for the executive structure, Section 2, 1, maintain the existing structure with an elected chief executive. Number 2 would be adopt a city-county manager form of government with an appointed manager and an elected at-large mayor serving as presiding officer of the Council of Commissioners.
Is there a second? Ms. Shaw?
I'm sorry. I will make a second, but I think it was mayor at large, not at-large mayor, if that's okay. Thanks. Okay, and I would second that
Okay.
emotion.
We have a motion from Dolan and a second by Shaw with at-large after the mayor. Ms. Casey.
Madam Chair, just have a question on this. Just going off of what Section 1 has, would it not read for retaining the existing structure with an elected, and or the second option is for the adoption of a city-county? Would we not stay consistent with the for retaining or for adoption?
Yes, and I think Mr. Enruth will put those exact terms in there. I think we're going for the meat, but I would agree it would have the for in front of those two. Thank you. Mr. Steppen.
So, question for my fellow commissioners. We have a motion, a second, so it's on the table for a vote, right? As commissioners, are we, and maybe this, I'd be interested in hearing the feedback of former county commissioners that have been in this role. Do you see yourself as making the decision that you feel is best as representative of the people, or what we're hearing from the feedback on what is best? Does my question make sense? Go ahead, Cindy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Matt, for that. So there's a motion and a second, and then I did ask for just a clarification on the word, but motion and a second, then on the question, like Lori just did, that on the question before we take a vote. To answer your question, I think that we are basing this strictly on what we have heard from the citizens. We have statistics that we got from Shanna, and I think that there's really overwhelming, leanings towards certain things, and so I think that our job was to review and to recommend, and the recommendation is based on what we've gotten from the people. I don't think I was saying on one vote, and so I hope that answers your question. Okay, thanks.
Ms. Dolan?
Madam Chair, I agree wholeheartedly with that as a former commissioner. Thanks, Matt.
And Mr. Steppen, I think in our final report, that analysis that you're looking for is part of it. Like, this commission has recognized that there is some unbalancing between the powers. And so we state that in that preliminary report. We need to restate it in the final report. It's not at all our opinion. It's rather, this is a statement of the fact that the legislative branch would have authority over that city-county manager. All right, are we ready for a vote? I'll take it by roll. Ms. Casey.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen.
Aye.
Mr. Steppen. Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Ms. Shaw.
Aye.
Ms. McCormick. And I also vote aye, so motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Section 3, the legislative structure. If the revised charter is adopted, what should the structure of the Council of Commissioners be? Vote for 1. 2, for maintaining 12 commissioners elected by district serving as part-time elected officials, or 4, reduced to 4 commissioners elected by district serving as a full-time elected officials. Mr. Dennehy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Never let me, somebody, ask me a question, No. I'm wondering if we can maybe add, or whether my colleagues think it's necessary for reducing to 4 commissioners elected by district serving as full-time elected officials and 1 mayor elected at large. So we have really a 5 commission with a mayor.
However, doesn't that complicate it if we do
Probably
a
does.
chief executive?
Right.
So, and that is that flow chart again, right? Like, we could have a chief executive and 4 commissioners.
That's right. Thank you.
Mr. Thielen?
Well, I still think that we should have had just 3 commissioners and let them just hammer it out. I think that the mayor is going to have a lot of other things on his plate that he's not gonna have, he shouldn't have to deal with what the council's doing. I still think that 3 commissioners is more than enough to take care of it. You're still gonna have the majority, 2 to 1, almost all the time, or unanimously. So, and they just have to sit there and figure it out. It's not, and it's gonna be better than having the 4, I think. That's my opinion.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've gotten a lot of input from folks across the county, including our rural, and I think that was a big push of trying to figure out the representation fairness with regard to Uptown Butte or Butte proper versus all of the rural parts of our county, which are growing more maybe than Butte proper itself. We've heard 3, 4, and 5, so to kind of round that around, that the median is 4, but I would also say if we wanted to add something about the rural representation, but that might be just too in the weeds for this. But I like the way these are written to say, keep the same as it is now, and then reduce to 4 and full-time. And then hopefully people will understand the previous question with the executive structure, adding that chair as the presiding officer of the council. So I actually like the way it's written here, and just to let folks know, and maybe that's the education piece about the rural versus in Butte representation.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand legislative structure, so thinking legislative since I did it for all those years, I'm thinking, okay, actually the mayor's legislative as well, but only if we end up with a manager. So I'm thinking that I like this structure as it is, but we'll probably have a booklet of some kind that's going to give some little more, put a little meat on the bone of what that means. In the event that there's a manager elected, then this would be the structure. Or wait a minute. No, if a manager was not elected, then this would be the structure for commissioners. But, just something to clarify that if there is a manager, then we would have the mayor and the 4 commissioners. You see what I'm saying? But just for the purpose of this ballot, and hopefully people will read our little educational piece that's going to give a little more information, I think that this should stand the way it is.
Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Shaw, I'm a little confused because we could maintain the chief executive but still reduce the number of commissioners. Okay. That's what.
Sorry, I was cross-talking. I was just meaning the word, the fact that the mayor's legislative, that's all, but absolutely is either 4 or status quo. Thanks.
Okay, was there any more discussion regarding Mr. Thielen's thought of going less than 4? Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was very intrigued when we had our public hearing that hearing some other proponents of having 3 commissioners as well. And then when I read our report of the survey, I never really took into consideration that, as much as what was in the report, that having a larger body, and I know that 3 to 4 is not a significant difference, but it is clear, the people that took the survey, that they do want more representation around the table. And then going back to, if there is a chief executive selected with 4 commissioners, they would still be the tie-breaking vote. Is that correct? And I believe that if the community wants an executive branch and the chief executive, they want that person to have a vote compared to a city manager who wouldn't have a vote. So I just wanted to explain the reasoning that I do believe that the 4 works. I was intrigued with the 3, but after just having a little more thought on it, that's where I think it makes a little bit more sense. So thank you.
Yeah, you're correct. The existing language regarding the chief executive and that person's powers and duties remains in the charter if we do not vote in a city county manager. So they would indeed be the tie-breaking vote and still retain their veto power. Mr. Thielen.
That's all fine and dandy. What are you gonna do with the mayor then? So we're not gonna have the mayor.
If the chief executive is retained, we would not have a mayor.
All
No.
right.
This is that flow chart again. It's just, we gotta, if then this, and yeah. Mr. Steppen.
So essentially, thank you, Madam Chair. So essentially, Commissioner Silk, what you're saying is under either scenario, there's a tie-breaking vote and there's an odd number of voters. It's also worth pointing out that in the survey, while I don't necessarily disagree with you, that was the lowest option, was the 3 commissioner choice out of the options presented to them.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remember us having lots of discussion about that tie-breaking issue, and I think, and I'll refer to Cindy, Ms. Shaw, to clarify this, because I think in our discussions, didn't we agree that, you know, with the council and the new number, and if this is adopted and they're full-time, to not have to do a tie break, to say, okay, we'll wait and then just keep continuing discussion until we figure it out. But again, that's not our purview. But is that kind of what we ended up with? I just trying to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for Cindy for that. So we discussed the possibility of tabling something if we just can't come to a consensus and it's a tie. But I think with 4 commissioners full-time and doing their homework and making sure that they get things, you know, they're not going to want to hamstring something. And I think that would probably happen. I can't say that it will happen. And you could have somebody not show up and you wouldn't have to worry about a tie. You know, I mean, that's always the other flip side of how many commissioners you have. So, but I think that maybe, just off the cuff, that the rules and order of business of the Council of Commissioners, they might want to put a little something in there regarding that. If it comes down to just 4 commissioners, which is an even number just like it is now. But if we don't want to sit and hamstring something that needs to be done, that's just out there for commissioners to consider. Thanks.
Okay, so it sounds like, is there any appetite for reducing that to 3? Okay, so it sounds like we would have the structure, the language be as proposed here, to reduce to 4 commissioners elected by district serving as full-time elected officials. So can I have a motion? Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a motion that we approve the Section 3 legislative structure language as it is proposed.
Is there a second? Second. So I have a motion from McCormick and a second from Shaw.
Thank you. Second.
All right, I'll start the opposite direction for our vote unless there's more discussion. Okay, hearing none, Ms. McCormick. Ms. Shaw. Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Steppen. Mr. Thielen. Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Ms. Casey.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So I have all affirmative with the exception of Mr. Thielen with a nay. Thank you, folks. That one carries. So skipping number 4, we'll move on to Section 5, Neighborhood Councils. If the revised charter is adopted, should provisions related to neighborhood councils be strengthened within the charter, vote for 1. Yes, authorize the Council of Commissioners to establish formal policies and procedures for the creation and operation of neighborhood councils. Or no, maintain the existing charter language regarding neighborhood councils. And I think this one needs a revision based on what Mr. and Ruth was talking about. Yeah, it would be that what you were talking about, 4, authorizing the Council of Commissioners to establish formal policies and procedures for the creation and operation of neighborhood councils, or 4, maintaining the existing charter language regarding neighborhood councils. So just scratch out the yes and no as proposed, as drafted here. So any discussion on this particular one? Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we are limited to 3 ballot issues, right? So is these the next run of decisions? Are they working against what we're trying to do, or can we use the language saying that we would revise or not revising the charter language and authorizing the council to establish formal changes in language? I'm sorry. My point is, the next section 5, 6, 7, 8 are all going to be put on the ballot. Is that going over our limit or not?
Others, please help me remember exactly what Mr. Enruth said, but I believe he said that we should vote on all of these, that they can go forward. He believes he's correct, and that the Secretary of State may come back. But Mr. Enruth, you're just right on time. We were talking about the number of questions, so we're to neighborhood councils, and I was trying to make sure I have this correct and my language precise, that we can add these other ones per the interpretation of the statute as you have read it. However, there was still a question from Dan Clark in regard to what the Secretary of State may say, and that she may refer back to him for his opinion, but you feel confident with us moving forward.
Correct. When I spoke with Mr. Clark, we specifically got into the topic of whether or not the 3 sub-option questions incorporated all questions, or if they were specifically related to the form of government. As I've relayed to this council, I relayed to him my interpretation of the statute, which is 3 questions as to the form of government. Other questions outside of the form of government don't count to it your 3 bites, the proverbial apple. After I explained that to him and he reviewed our questions, I believe he said, with it being eloquently put that way, yes, I agree with you. He goes, I said, however, what he said was, however, the Secretary of State may look at it differently, and they refer all of their questions back to Mr. Clark, and he liked our interpretation of it. So I was confident in that, specifically because the statute's clear. It's to form of government, and neighborhood councils are not as to a form of government. Form of government specifically relates to, in my opinion, and several other attorneys' opinions that I've spoken to about this, are form of government. Commissioner form, mayor form, chief executive form. So yes, I felt confident that we can present all of them to the Secretary of State and go forth that way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Matt.
Mr. Steppen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. County Attorney Enruth, I'm assuming that the Secretary of State's going to be looking at a number of these from across the state. And is there a chance that, although they may not disagree with your interpretation, that they need to hold us to a similar standard as everyone else in the number of questions? Are we breaking the trend, so to speak? And what I'm getting at is, if we're going to have a meeting with the Secretary of State, maybe that's the first question, because it makes fire services and everything past question number 3 potentially moot, right?
Commissioner Steppen, you are correct. They will be looking at a lot of these from across the state, and if the Secretary of State does not accept our proposals, obviously they can't go on the ballot. However, I was confident in it, and so was Mr. Clark, and that we could present them. But that was actually his exact, we'll say, concern the law needs to be applied correctly to everybody. So it could be simply the fact that everybody else just needs to be informed. They can ask the additional questions so long as they don't go against the structure of government. But yes, it can be a question that is presented after we make a phone call and set up an appointment.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to Section 5 Neighborhood Councils, I'd like to make a motion to use the language listed on our second page, and replacing yes and no with for, FOR. Authorize the Council of Commissioners to establish a formal policies and procedures for the creation and operation of neighborhood councils, or 4, maintain the existing charter language regarding neighborhood councils.
Is there a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Purdue Dolan and a second by Dennehy. Is there further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll take our vote. Ms. Casey?
Aye.
Ms. Dolan? Mr. Thielen? Mr. Steppen? Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Ms. McCormick? I've also vote aye. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, folks. Moving on. Go ahead, Mr. Enruth.
Just briefly, so I can catch up on notes, have we voted yes on all of them? Thank you.
We did have one vote against Section 3 legislative structure from Mr. Thielen, but otherwise it did carry. And we had language change in Section 2 that we said adopt a city-county manager form of government with an appointed manager and a mayor elected at large serving as presiding officer of the Council of Commissioners. Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just noticed under Section 303 that they're not considered neighborhood councils. Community councils, do we have to change, after we just voted on, do we have to change it to reflect the existing language in the charter that talks about community councils? I know I'm cool with it, but as far as it going to the public, as far as dotting our i's and crossing our t's.
Yes.
Commissioner
Mr.
Silk is
Enruth?
correct.
Yeah, so we need to undo that vote, rescind that vote because the language is incorrect. Mr. Enruth.
The council can call for anybody that voted for it, which was everybody, can make an amended motion.
Okay. All right. May we have the amended motion, Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion. I make a motion to amend the motion that we just passed and clarify it to where it reads under Section 5, where it will say for FOR, authorize Council of Commissioners to establish formal policies and procedures for the creation and operation of neighborhood councils.
Community councils.
No, because we want neighborhood councils.
We won't. Yep, sorry.
Then on the next one, 4, maintain the existing charter language regarding community councils.
Okay. So on the 4 line, it's for authorizing the Council of Commissioners to establish formal policies and procedures for the creation and operation of neighborhood councils. And in the bottom one, for maintaining the existing charter language regarding community councils. Okay.
That's correct.
All right. So I have an amended motion from Silk and a second from Thielen. So we'll vote again. Ms. Casey?
Aye.
Ms. Dolan? Mr. Thielen? Mr. Steppen?
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Ms. McCormick? And I also vote aye. Thank you, folks. Excellent work, Mr. Silk. All right. Moving into Section 7, Reclamation and Environmental Services Department. Oh, yeah. Wow. Maybe I need a time out. Section 6, Parks and Recreation Department. If the revised charter is adopted, should the charter formally establish a Parks and Recreation Department? Option 1 would be for authorizing the inclusion of a Parks and Recreation Department in the charter, or for retaining the existing charter language, and it's under Public Works, isn't it? So how would we need to change, revise that section? Because there's nothing about Parks and Recreation in the department currently in the charter. Mr. Enrith, do you have a suggestion?
I would suggest that it be similar to the previous one under section 5, maintain the existing charter language regarding the Parks and Recreation Department, because they are labeled Parks and Recreation. They're just under that other section.
Okay. Ms. McCormick?
On that second one, you just make sure you don't use the word department. Just,
Correct. Ms. McCormick.
So,
is
Ms.
correct.
McCormick, you would suggest for retaining the existing charter language regarding Parks and Recreation in the charter?
correct,
Okay, so cut out department?
correct. Department in the charter.
Okay. Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask the county attorney, with regard to sections 6, 7, and 8, Park and Rec, Superfund Department, and Animal Services, isn't this something we could put on the bucket of recommendations to the Council of Commissioners and not put these on the actual ballot, and they could make a binding decision with regard to adding it or changing it in local government? I'm still not convinced, especially with 6 and 8, more like recommendations, or actually 6. I'm just not convinced that it rises to the level of the ballot, but could you enlighten us with that, if that's possible?
My current understanding is, Commissioner Dolan, my current understanding is in order to modify the charter, it's got to go to the ballot. So if we want to include it in the charter, yes, it has to be presented in order to modify the charter and put it in, it has to be presented that way.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just remind everyone in regards to Commissioner Dolan's question, except for Park and Recs being under the Public Works section of the charter, both in the, if the existing charter is retained or a new charter is adopted, under the powers and duties of the Council of Commissioners, it does allow the Council of Commissioners to establish and prescribe the functions of departments, offices, or agencies by ordinance or resolution in addition to those created by this charter. So I expressed my concern about this prior when we voted of doing this, but it's no disrespect to any of the departments or their directors. I think they all do a great job. I just don't feel that they specifically need to be called out in the charter, including the Reclamation and Superfund, because there's many documents that require that. But with the age of technology and AI and what's coming forth, I think it's best allowed to have the administration of how it should operate and whether it should be a department. So I just wanted to explain that, and again, I would be happy to vote on taking Park and Recs out of Public Works, but I will be voting nay on including the departments, because I don't think any of the departments are any more vital to the operation of local government than any other department. The health department does a lot of work in relation to Superfund, and they're just as important to the community as well as other departments. So that's just my feelings on it. But I would remind everyone that the charter already authorizes the Council of Commissioners to create and establish or rearrange departments how they see necessary.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. and No disrespect to Ms. Casey, but we're here to put out ballot issues that we've been asked about, not only by directors of departments, but then we put it out to the public, and I believe they pretty much, overwhelmingly agreed that they needed the recognition. I do agree that it's already out there in the charter, But to just memorialize that, I think in a way, it just helps those departments. And again, it's the voters that decide, and we are going by what we've heard from the voters. That's just all I have to say. Thanks.
Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the input from everybody on this. And the more that I go through this process, I wish that there was just more living documents that could be edited and changed, not just in the charter. I agree with Lori that there's no other department that's more important than another department, regardless if they're mentioned in the charter or not. And we have looked at a lot of documents where there's very little departments in charters because they're run through ordinance. And I don't believe that they're any less important. I understand and appreciate the memorialization of those departments. I truly do. And I believe that if we didn't put it on the survey, no one would know any different. But I do believe that the Council of Commissioners has a duty and a responsibility to manage the departments how they see fit. And I'm just thinking about the next study commission in 10 or 20 years, if there's going to be more departments added and more departments added and more departments added, and maybe not, they can be taken out as well too. And this is what we were elected to do. We can disagree, and it is totally fine. It is totally fine. I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to go, and that's okay. But I just wanted to put it out there, all my reasonings for that, that I probably will be a vote no on this too, and that's just fine. And I appreciate everyone who does vote yes for this. So thank you.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that. You know, it's interesting. We've got a lot of feedback from with regard to Park and Rec, but the biggest concern, I think, if I remember correctly, was wanting to make sure they have the funding they need, make sure that the parks are kept up to in tip-top shape, and all of those things which are vitally important. I don't, you know, personally, in reading this and going through the process of testimony from all kinds of folks, moving Park and Rec and memorializing it in the charter outside of Public Works won't change any of that, their concerns. Again, I will voice that I will be a no as well, because I remember way back when Ms. Casey said the charter should be as vague as we can make it, because, and I think to Chad's good point was, you know, what's the next 10 years? And you know, will the health department come up? And every single department will be memorialized in the charter, and we'll have a 100-page charter. So I think there needs to be that clarification as well. So this will be interesting. Thanks.
Folks, I don't have a motion yet, so if we could do that, and then we'll continue with our discussion. Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make a motion regarding Section 6, Park and Recreation Department. 4, includes a park recreation department in the charter. 4, do not include a park and maintain the existing charter language regarding park and recreation.
So I have a motion from McCormick. Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay. So I have a motion from McCormick and a second from Shaw. Now, further discussion. Okay, I will add to that discussion in the proper order of things. I appreciate you all. We just do what we do. It's fine. I also happen to agree with my colleagues in regards to keeping the charter as open as possible and giving the authority to our Council of Commissioners to operate as they see fit. And so I would like to put that on the record before I take the vote. And so if we're ready, if there is any other discussion. Okay, so Ms. McCormick, I'll start with you. Okay, Ms. Shaw? Mr. Silk?
Nay.
Mr. Dennehy?
Nay.
Mr. Steppen? Mr. Thielen? Ms. Dolan? Ms. Casey?
Nay.
And I also vote nay. So motion fails. We're not moving Parks and Rec to the ballot. 6-3. Okay, so moving on to section 7, Reclamation and Environmental Services Department. If the revised charter is adopted, should the charter formally establish a Reclamation and Environmental Services Department? For including the department in the charter, or for retaining the existing charter language regarding reclamation and environmental services? Is it called Superfund? I thought it was Reclamation and Environmental Services. I thought that's what we got it. Superfund? Thank you. Okay, so let me restate that. For retaining the existing language in the charter regarding Superfund department. We don't have a Superfund department, just regarding, Ms. Casey, I'm sorry, can you give us the right language? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mr. Steppen?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Something that I just want to say about as we go through, is there still the opportunity to catch these things going forward? Because I want to be clear, when I drafted these, it was basically in response to the sample structure we got from Dan Clark. To me, didn't make things clear. And so I drafted a question structure that you see here and basically said, does this work or not work? And tell us why. And without a lot of thought to the words, but more the themes and the structure, if that makes sense. So there's still an opportunity to edit.
That's my understanding, is that Mr. Enruth can polish these to make sure that they're correct. We're trying to get the language as close to what the ballot language will look like, and I think we'd bring it back and take a look at it if there's something that radically changes the meaning of that question. Mr. Enruth?
Chairman Brettel, that is correct, Commissioner Steppen. Your email provided the basis. I did not modify any of these prior to giving it to council because, in my opinion, that's me putting forth my opinion, and I am not an elected council member. It is my job to polish your language, and I think tonight what you guys are doing is exactly what I anticipated, was reviewing it, modifying the language. I'm taking notes on the language on which ones pass, such as, Commissioner Silk catching the neighborhood councils compared to community councils, or in what we're currently discussing right now, establishing a reclamation environmental services department. Obviously, if need be, we can modify that language to a Superfund department, because that's, specifically already stated that way in the charter. But as it's been discussed over the past, going on 2 years now, this was kind of the language that everybody was looking at, was recreational environmental services. So that's why I didn't touch any of this, but Chairman Brendel is correct that I will polish the language when it's all said and done without changing the meaning. And I do think the Secretary of State's probably going to give us their 2 cents on language as well.
Madam Chair?
We're just small Butte, Montana.
I did
so.
find the existing language under the Chief Executive, and it's to be accountable for coordinating all Superfund activities, monitoring the funds, and shall interface with the Volunteer Citizens Advisory Board. So they refer to it in the existing as Superfund activities.
All right, so then it would read some approximation of for including the department in the charter, or for retaining the existing language in the charter regarding Superfund activities. Can I have a motion and then we'll have our discussion? Mr. Silk?
I'll try this again. I make a motion to move forward with section 7, reading 4, include the department in the charter as Reclamation and Environmental Services Department, or 4, retaining the existing charter language referring to Superfund activities.
Is there a second? So I have a motion from Silk and a second from Dolan. So discussion on the question. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am confused. I mean, we voted, all of us, to even add these on as possible things to go on the charter, or I mean on the ballot. And why now, the day of the actual voting on it, it suddenly, I don't know, I'm just surprised, totally surprised. I know I do remember Lori's comments in the past and things like that, but I mean, I can't believe this is just now coming before us and, you know, giving us now it's the kind of 11th hour trying to decide if we want to add these in. Now, for Superfund, can I talk about Superfund? Not Superfund, the Reclamation and Environmental Services. They're integral to this town, and if we want to change the word from established to recognized, I mean, I deal with that better than established, I guess, because they're already established. But it's the recognition that the one reference to them in the entire charter is that they're under the chief executive, and I think it's, in this case, I won't say they're identical to this. You can't compare Parks and Rec's department to the reclamation because they already are. They're both departments, but one is under another. They wanted to be taken out. But just the recognition of that is so important. I mean, this is in perpetuity, as I love that word, you know, forever and ever. And I believe it deserves recognition in the charter. And even if it's just on that reason, sure, I mean, the ordinances can be done like we had others, like the Civic Center was by ordinance, didn't appear, that came before us to recognize them. But this to me just stands out, and I'd be really surprised that we wouldn't vote this in. Thank you.
Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that when we voted in the past, at least my understanding was we were voting to move it to the preliminary report and put it in there, and that we would have a final vote on each item of what we wanted to the ballot. So I would just say that was my understanding of how the process was going to work.
Ms. Casey, you're exactly correct. It was about what we're moving forward to the preliminary report, seeking more feedback from the community. And I do recognize that our community was rather affirmative in what they wanted to see in the charter there as well. I think I have Ms. Dolan, and then I'll take you, Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was going to voice that, so thank you, Lori, that we just voted to move this to the preliminary report, and it's just a combination of moving it to the report, listening to constituents and folks from the listening session on. I don't recall anyone coming up to me personally and saying, we've got to add this into the charter to memorialize it. I think that was more of our discussions. But that said, I think that I don't think any of these votes tonight with regard to putting them on the ballot is the 11th hour. I think this is the time and place for us to do this part of the work. So I don't think that final votes to the ballot is a big change for what we've done so far.
Ms. McCormick.
Well, it is disheartening to me because we did hear very strongly from the public in our surveys about these issues. I mean, look at reclamation, strongly support, 38.2%, support, 47.1%, neutral, 5.9%, oppose, 8.8%. Yes, we put them in the preliminary report so that we could put things out there and get responses back from the public, and now we're ignoring them. That's disheartening.
I think we're jumping to conclusions on reclamation and environmental services. I think that's the question we're currently on. I'm assuming that your comments are referring to the last vote on Parks and Rec. Regarding the question of reclamation and environmental services department, I will say that I don't have the same opinion as I did with Parks and Recreation department, simply because of the amount of work that's left to be done, the fact that there is a very large budget that goes with that department, the fact that if we change chief executive to city county manager, we're removing that part of the charter, and so I think it needs to be in the charter. You know, we have to have that language there to make sure that this department is memorialized, and I think that having it set forward for the next 50 years is really important, that it's included. I wouldn't want our council to vote to remove that department from the charter. So that is my opinion on this particular one. Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I respect everyone's opinion, and I think this is the process of voting. And so to say that we can be disheartened of how a vote goes, but we all have perspectives, and I'll go back to what Chad said. The Reclamation Department is a department now. It's a department by ordinance. So we as this committee did put it out there, and I agree, the public agrees that it should be a department. However, I disagree that it needs to be in the charter, because it's gonna remain a department until the Council of Commissioners say they wanna revamp it. So I'm not disrespecting what the public says. I am just going, if we're going to give the Council of Commissioners the authority, I believe we should. And so we all have opinions, and like Commissioner Shaw says, I'm one vote. And so, but I think we need to respect the process, and that's what this process is we don't all have to be unanimous on every vote. Thank you.
Mr. Steppen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. When I look at this particular topic, we had a discussion, and we chose only to move it to the preliminary report. It was in the report. We put out a survey to the public that says, is this important to you? And the public said 56.6% yes, this is very important. So for me, and this is kind of why I asked the question on the front end, is, we felt it was important enough to put on. We asked for the public's feedback. And to me, the public's feedback is clear. So I'm struggling with why I would go against that feedback that we asked for. Thanks.
Mr. Dennehy, is your microphone just on, or did you have a question or a comment? Okay.
I'm good.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is more of a process question for the county attorney. So just say as we go forth and do these individual votes, what if we end up with a tie? And does the tie fail, or what do we do?
Commissioner Dolan, someone could abstain, technically, yes, and I was gonna say I might be a lawyer, but my simple math is on point, and we have an odd number of people tonight.
Is there any further discussion on the question? Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, again, want to, clarify, there's no intention to hurt anyone's feelings on here, but at the same time, we have to, move past that. I agree with the chair that the reclamation is different than Parks and Rec in my mind, and that's fine. That's why individually we got elected to make these decisions. So to me, a 37% compared to a 56% is a significant difference. Now, people can argue that or not argue that, but I know we'll be able to move past it. I just feel like I need to voice my opinion so I don't shock anyone when I vote. But I just wanted to say that before we go to vote. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to start on, excuse
Sorry.
me, Ms. Dolan.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I agree with Ms. Casey in giving the Council of Commissioners the authority to be able to massage this in the way they want to, and I think I have to kind of push back a little bit on the survey. Yes, everyone in Butte-Silver Bow that's engaged understands completely that Superfund is the priority and is going to continue in perpetuity forever. We are going to have Superfund issues, but memorializing it in the charter, do we need to go to that next level? I don't know if we got down to the granular level in the survey, because I think people were saying, yes, we need that department, and it is an independent department now. And so because it is, does it need to be in the charter, or are we just going to open up Pandora's box with every other department? So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thanks.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Any further questions or comments? Okay, so Ms. Casey,
Nay.
Ms. Dolan, Mr. Thielen,
Need a coin?
Your microphone.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Steppen? Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. McCormick? And I also vote aye. So I had 2 nays, Shanna, and the rest were aye. Thank you, folks. Moving on to the Animal Services Department. If the revised charter is adopted, should the charter change that leadership structure of the Animal Services Department from a manager to a director? For changing the title to director, or for maintaining the current language in the charter? Ms. McCormick.
Well, for whatever reason, this didn't even get into our survey or our preliminary report, so we don't have anything to go by, as far as I'm concerned, to make a decision. So I think
this was one of those questions that we were looking at that was a grammar change, if you will, although the word is important from manager to director. And I think one of the questions that we had is, can we have a lumped language question that was about all the necessary grammar changes, if I recall that conversation. And then we just walked away from that, given the workload that we have, because we had started walking through the charter and its individual lines and the individual language that we had. I think I sent a very long email at one point to Mr. Enruth that he responded to, and we walked away from those particular things given the weight of all the things that we had to change. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it is in the preliminary report, section 7.07, Animal Services Department. There shall be established by ordinance and maintained an Animal Service Department for the purpose of enforcing animal control ordinances and confining nuisance animals. The director, that's where I guess that language changes, of this department shall be in charge of the department administration, enforcement, and confinement, and shall be accountable directly to the chief executive / city county manager. I guess that is obviously dependent on that first question.
Ms. McCormick.
well, I do apologize. I was a little reactionary. I don't think it got out on our survey. We don't have any survey information about that question.
And 9 of us missed that.
And we didn't talk about it in our public open houses at all.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, because of that, Mary, and I think that's a good point to make, that it was not on the surveys, or it didn't rise to the level because there's so much other things in the listening sessions, that maybe it could go on the list of recommendations for the Council of Commissioners to tackle. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Ms. Casey.
Madam Chair, I believe at the open houses it was on the board, because I remember trying to answer the question of why we were going to change this from manager to director, and we voted no on the Civic Center manager. And it was a difficult question to answer to the public, because really it's semantics. Manager runs the department, director runs the department. So it was on the boards that were created for the open house. We might have not brought it up to the attention when we did our presentations, but I do recall that it was on the boards.
I agree. I remember talking about it too afterward when we hadn't covered it because we were going over the big ticket items and somebody asked the question, what is this? Ms. McCormick.
But, thank you, Madam Chair, but it was not on the survey, and that's,
And I agree, it's not on the survey, and 9 of
I-
us revised that survey and looked at it and missed that as well. So we were all,
we don't have.
accountable for that one. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the reason this came up at all is the fact that the current manager of the Animal Services Department is the lowest paid manager / director of a department in Butte-Silver Bow. And we were asked if we could rectify that, and I explained the ballot bucket and the recommendation bucket. So that's kind of where it started, just for kind of situational awareness. And I'm not sure where that falls with the Civic Center, but as far as the animal services, and I just go back to our initial thing about fairness, and I just thought, maybe that's something we could tackle.
Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that title alone, director or manager, doesn't dictate the salary. Directors within Butte-Silver Bow make different salaries. So there is not a starting set salary unless that's changed since I've left the department as a director, but there's many directors that were paid different salaries. So the title alone does not dictate the salary. And so if there is an inequity in salaries, I think that should be handled through the chief executive and the council of commissioners, and maybe doing a wage study of what managers of animal service departments make, because that's usually how they set the other wages.
Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think there's a process in place currently on titles and salaries. If the Animal Service Department has a board, I think the first place you would go to is the board asking for the change from manager to director. If the board approves that change, then it goes to, I believe, the Council of Commissioners Personnel Department for discussion, and they could have that discussion. And also, I think the chief executive has the ability to, after hearing from a board, I don't know if in this certain case, but if there is an animal service board that gives a recommendation that the department person should be named manager or director, that can happen, and the chief executive can make that recommendation, then move it up to the council for approval. So there is a process in place where some of these things are taken care of. I know there was when I was there.
Mr. Steppen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And this is going back to some of our earliest interviews, I think. But what I vaguely recall, and I'd have to go back into my notes, is that this conversation really centered around after Manager Hogart gave her presentation, did we feel the work that she was doing was that of a manager or director? And if we felt it was director, then I think that's where the recommendation came from. And that potentially providing the appropriate title may help that individual make the case for the compensation conversation. So that's my best recollection of that conversation.
I love our commission so much, and we're still kind of out of order. It's okay. So if we'd like to have a motion to move this forward to the ballot, then we can have further discussion before we vote, or we could fail to have a motion. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want a clarification from you or County Attorney Enruth. If we come up, and this is an if, because I don't know if most of the things we've talked about over the past year and a half are mostly like ballot issues, not a list of extra recommendations, but will we have to vote on that bucket of list of recommendations, or do we just line them up, give them to the county attorney, and he passes it along to the Council of Commissioners without we don't need a vote for that, right?
Mr. Enruth.
It depends. It always depends. I believe that the council can actually have a vote to not vote. So because it's the list of recommendations, that list is always fairly extensive. I mean, having a full council vote on every single one of those recommendations could get very tedious and time consuming. I do believe that the council can agree that the council members can present their own individual recommendations. Those all go on a list and go to the Council of Commissioners.
And Ms. Dolan, we also, in our final report, have to give a dissenting opinion, in there as well. So if there's things that are, maybe mixed up in those recommendations where half of us want something, the other half, if they, we can have the minority report in there to clarify, what was in the minority. I think our colleagues might want a minority report on Parks and Recreation, right? Okay, so is there a motion to move Animal Services Department to the ballot?
I motion that we move Animal Services to the ballot. I was unprepared to make this motion. For change of manager to director, or for maintain current structure.
Do I have a second? Okay, so I have a motion from Steppen, a second from Dolan. Is there any other discussion? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really came unprepared because I came from far away. But does anybody have the most current survey? And I'd like to hear what the results were for this particular item.
It wasn't on the survey.
Do we have a revised survey that apparently, I think somebody said that it was on there?
It wasn't on the survey.
Ms. Shaw, it was on our boards when we went to our public outreach. It was mentioned on there. It wasn't a question on the survey.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me. Yeah. So can I just continue with my comment, knowing that we don't have any feedback really from the voters, and because we did not have it on the survey. Is that the way I understand it? And were there any other numbers, and I'll ask Shanna this, that were not on a survey related, but maybe, comments or sticky notes or anything? I'm just curious, but probably not enough to make a difference. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Shaw, members of the commission. Sorry, sun's in my face.
You need sunglasses.
Yeah, my apologies. It wasn't on the survey. I mean, I guess I put it in that bucket of kind of language changes to the charter, updating some charter language, cleaning up some charter language, that type of thing. And we never had a discussion about it, so it did not get put on the survey. And I read through every single comment that was submitted. I don't recall any comments about animal services at all.
Okay, thank you. So I will have to say that is problematic for me to vote for not knowing since we're trying to stick with the whole idea that this is all directed to our constituents, the citizens of Butte, and so I will probably be voting no. Thanks.
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two things. One of the things is, I think all three departments that we just talked about have differences. They all are mentioned within the charter, but one of them could change if there was no chief executive. Therefore, there might need to be some changes for that particular department in the charter. This particular department with animal services is already in the charter. I view this as just a grammatical change that, although wasn't in the survey, I feel like we were elected to give our opinion on how to clean it up. And that's where I probably will go with that, is a yay on this. My second comment is that the motion on the the last option, instead of maintain current structure, does it need to be for retaining the existing charter language in animal services, so we're consistent? So do we need an amendment to the motion?
Go ahead.
All right. So I make a motion to amend the motion that was just stated by Mr. Steppen. And for section 8, under animal services, to change the word from manager to director. Then the other part of that question would be for retaining the existing charter language related to animal services. Retaining the existent language of manager would be my motion. Boy.
Okay, so it would be, the second option would be for maintaining the existing chartered language of manager related to animal services.
As the person that made the motion, I would accept that amendment. Is that the right way?
It's a second.
I second it.
We're writing songs now. Okay, so we have a motion, an amended motion, and a second about animal services. Is there any more discussion? Okay, I will start with Ms. McCormick.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, could you restate the amended motion? I don't understand. I'm confused. I mean, I don't.
Okay, so instead of saying maintaining current structure and that second part as it's written on the paper here, it would be structured the exact same as the other ones have been. It would be for retaining the existing charter language of manager in animal services, for animal services.
I vote aye.
Okay, so I have aye. Ms. Shaw?
Nay.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy?
Nay.
Mr. Steppen? Mr. Thielen?
Nay.
Ms. Dolan? Ms. Casey?
Nay.
And I also vote nay. So that one fails 5-4. Okay, Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since it was a nay vote, can we put that on the list of recommendations to the Council of Commissioners?
Absolutely, and
Awesome. Thank
we'd
you.
also need that, that second opinion, the dissenting opinion in the final report. Or excuse me, the minority report, not dissenting, the minority opinion in the final report. So that would be our ayes, and then the recommendation for that to go to the council. All right, we're ready to move on to the fire services proposed amendments to the existing charter form of government. All right, so Mr. Enworth, can you help guide me? Because we actually have those 4 pathways forward, so maybe some direction on how to proceed.
So yes, the first pathway is to vote for option, is to vote, if you voted tonight, you would have option 1, excuse me, not option 1, you would have vote for 1 or 2. So 1 would be for the adoption of either the volunteers request or the career services request. You would have to pick one or the other, and the second option would be to maintain the charter language. The next option that we were talking about is to present the question as I have it here to the Montana Secretary of State and see if it is acceptable. This is how I always envisioned the question looking, is a 1 or 2 or 3, unless obviously voted otherwise. But when you look at the general ballot requirements section 73150, it has that specific language too of existing form of government. And this is how the question has to be presented on the ballot. This goes back to, I do not believe that this is a question regarding the existing form of government. So I wrote this. The language that's in here is the language that was provided to the council in the previous memo. It is detailed, and it is detailed specifically because I believe the Attorney General's opinion and state law requires it to be detailed. So for option 1, for adoption of the following, all volunteer fire departments and rural fire districts located within the city county shall be removed from the charter and shall operate independently of the city county in accordance with the laws of the state of Montana. Then option 2 is for the adoption of the following, which is fire protection services within the city county are declared through the charter to be a unified government function of the consolidated government. Now technically we have language that is very close to that. What we don't have is the following. All volunteer departments and rural fire districts located within the city county are hereby consolidated into and made part of the BSB Fire Department, excluding the areas, and this has to be specific and in here, the towns of Walkerville, Montana and Melrose, Montana, because they do fall outside of that. That is already in our charter. The administration, operational control, and coordination of all fire protection services shall be exercised by the BSB Fire Department under the authority of the Director of Fire Services and Council of Commissioners. And then this next part is specific to the volunteers, that all duties, powers, and responsibilities previously vested by Montana law and the boards of the trustees or governing bodies of the volunteer or rural fire districts are extinguished and now are being exercised by Butte-Silver County. So that is their operational control and budget authority. And then obviously the third one, and I apologize, the font didn't change for some reason, which is for maintaining the existing charter language regarding the fire department. So this is how I would like to present it in this format to the Secretary of State to determine whether or not this falls outside of that existing form of government question, and if this would be okay, for lack of a better term, to be placed on the ballot. That's, I believe, what I was asked to do. So those are the options. Is option 1, vote for one or the other plus the existing form of the government, existing form of the charter language. Option 2 is table it. Option 3 is present this to the Secretary of State.
Ms. McCormick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm concerned about how the explanation for the what we would call option 2 is presented, because it doesn't say anything about the volunteer coordinator. It doesn't say anything about the volunteers submitting their budget to the Council of Commissioners. And those may be little details, but if they're not included in the ballot language, and that's what passes, passes. It's not what passes is what's in our preliminary report isn't what passes, it's what passes here. And so I think those things need to be included.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mary. I have a lot of concerns about the language, and even though we may be voting just to take it to the Secretary of State, I think we do a disservice to Butte-Silver, everyone that has engaged in the fire process, to have, I would like to have some time for them to comment, both the career and the volunteers, with regard to specifically Mary's question about what language and what items should be on the ballot. If we want to present to the Secretary of State just the process, the format, and if these three, if we can go forward with that, but this big language, all of this language, I would like input from career firefighters, from the fire chief. I would like input from the volunteers, because to Mary's point, whatever passes, passes, and is binding. And so I don't want to vote on language that we haven't discussed in this form?
Ms. Casey, and then I'll take you, Mr. Enright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question in regard to that statement that what passes, because when we vote for instance, if a city manager passes, we have a whole set of duties outlined within that charter. So those aren't all voted on, at least the way we've presented them. So would fire in some respect not be the same? Like not every detail, I mean, maybe we do need fire coordinator or volunteer coordinator in there, but not every detail is in every ballot language, because the final report's kind of the supplemental guide, if you will, to your voting. When you go to, I guess that's my understanding of it, is that the mayor has duties within the charter, so you're voting whether you want that mayor, and you probably have, before you vote, better do some research to know what those duties are or whatnot. So is fire not the same?
I'll defer this to Mr. Enruth, but I felt the same way, Ms. Casey, that we're giving this big report with all of the suggested charter changes or the expected charter changes if the changes were voted in. That very nice guide you made us with, looking at this change and that change, or what did or did not change. Mr. Enruth, can you please weigh in?
Chairman Brandel, Commissioner Casey, yes, I agree. You can leave it open that way, and then it's up to, that's why this language is Director of Fire Services and Council of Commissioners. I want to be very clear, this language is not new. It was given to this council several months ago in the memo that was drafted. I thought that was circulated and everybody had the option to review it. That's why I went down literal cut and paste with a few small modifications, just grammatically speaking. So that's why I put it this way. However, to Commissioner Dolan's point, it is also very easy to not vote on the language, but to vote on the structure. And that being taking the simple language that is currently in the other document that we've been going off of tonight and just doing the, first one, second one, third one, or structure, and presenting that to the Secretary of State to determine whether or not that structure is okay. So one, yes, they can always add the volunteer coordinator. The volunteer coordinator language can be put into this. With regards to the budgets, how budgets are conducted in Butte-Silver County is through the budget department. I mean, if you start getting into the nitty-gritty of who does what with their budgets in the charter, I mean, that pulls all of that authority away from the director of our budget director. And back to Ms. Casey's point, I think that's the whole point is it needs to be vague enough that it allows for Butte-Silver County to work with what's being asked of it. The only reason that option 2 is more in-depth than anything else that we've looked at on the ballot itself is because I think state law requires it. Like you have to be very, very clear if you're requesting to remove volunteers from a charter. Any ambiguity doesn't work. The state law is clear. It's meant to protect them and meant to prohibit counties from using that vague language to take over their processes. I mean, they're governed by boards of trustees. They have their own responsibilities. They're governed under a whole section of state law, which is why the charters have to be specific, which is why this language was developed to be very, very specific, that everything comes into the charter. So that's why it was in that memo. Yes, I agree with Commissioner Casey. And also I agree with, I believe it was Commissioner McCormick, was it you? That was, or Shaw. It was one of you two, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at either of you. With regards to the volunteer coordinators, that can be added in here, but it can also be left up to the Director of Fire Services and Commissioners.
Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just pulled up the 1996 ballot question when there was the removal of the fire coordinator in the implementation of the Director of Fire Services. And that reads 4, adoption of the amendments to the Butte-Silver Charter, deleting out-of-date language, adding stylistic changes, adopting gender-neutral language, and updating the fire district article as proposed by the Butte-Silver Local Government Study Commission, or 4, retention of the existing charter language. So I believe that it's this body's duty to educate the community in what those changes are, because we cannot list all changes. Very similar to what Ms. Casey just mentioned, there is a ton of stuff that goes into a city manager or a mayor, and that stuff is lined out. I believe the intent of the commission is just as important as what goes on the ballot, because the intent of the commission in '96 was to change that. I do strongly believe that we should move this forward just so we can get an answer. Can we do this or not do this? And then have the discussion later of what do we want it to look like on the ballot at a later date, is would be my recommendation.
Mr. Thielen, would you like to make a motion? Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to ask this question before we take a vote on this. Is it possible for us tonight to take a vote on the structure, like the county attorney just articulated, for A or B, and then the status quo or maintaining? That's the structure we're asking the Secretary of State to say yay or nay to, and then get the opinion of Dan Clark, if I'm correct with that process. So if we tonight can vote on that structure to then have that Secretary of State conversation, in the meantime, we can talk, and to Chad's point, is to try and get that language, because we should vote on that as well. But I think it should be a two-step process to give time for some input. And I do understand that we got some of this language prior, but we're looking at it tonight as putting it on the ballot. And so it could have changed between then and now, but I think that tonight it would behoove us to just do a structure vote, because that's the question. Because if they say no, you can't, language is a moot point. I mean, moving forward is a moot point. If we can't do this the way we'd like it to and the way we've worked so hard for 18 months, I just think that's a better way to go, but I'll ask that.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dolan. I think that's what Mr. Thielen was alluding to, is can we have a motion on a structure question and then move forward from there? And I don't mean to speak for you, Mr. Thielen, but I think we were of that mindset that the first question from county attorney was, do we want to ask this structural question of the clerk, the Secretary of State? So if there's a motion to that effect, then we can continue our discussion.
Well, let's give it a go. I'd like to make a motion that we submit this to the Secretary of State to make sure that the language, or it is how it's supposed to be, so according to MCA, so we can put it on the ballot.
Structure.
The structure, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Wrong word. Structure is correct
Okay.
to put on the ballot, so that's my motion. The
Okay.
structure.
Mr. Thielen, I have a structure question. Is there a second?
I second.
So I have a second from Silk. All right, further discussion on structure going to the Secretary of State. Ms. Casey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is very difficult, the fire question for me, and I've been very conflicted. So I am willing to vote yay for the, or aye for the structure. But when we come to a final vote, I am not convinced yet that it is the best interest of this community for the volunteers to be out on their own. I think there's a lot that goes into this. We heard some information that Big Butte owns their facility. That's not entirely accurate. They may own their existing facility, but Butte-Silver did put funding into their newer garage. And in so doing some of that research, Butte-Silver put money into equipment. So I think there's it's not as easy as just saying remove us and we'll run on our own. So I've been very conflicted of how this will go. So I just want to be clear that I'm okay asking the question, but when it comes time to vote, I don't know if I will vote to put both options on or not. I'm very undecided on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's, as Ms. Dolan had said and Mr. Enworth had said, there's a process. And so it's still, to me, those kind of 3 pathways or 4s, I've been calling it. So once we have the answer from the Secretary of State, that will start to direct our voting and our decision-making process. But I would want to entertain those separately before we move them all forward, just as a blanket. Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lori, if I'm understanding you correctly, while we assumed that we could put multiple options on the ballot, there was still likely a conversation and a vote on each option, right?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Steppen, yes, that was my understanding, that the vote could be to put one option on or both options on, if that's approved in the language, that our vote could be to only put option 1, only put option 2, or put both on. That was my understanding kind of from the beginning. And so I have been very conflicted since we have been doing this and in my research and what is best for this community. So that's why I just want to be clear that I'm okay asking the structural question of the Secretary of State, but my understanding is there'd still be a vote of if we want to put both options on or one option on.
Mr. Steppen.
Is that, so do we need to have that conversation? I mean, 2 ways to look at it. One, should we decide tonight what we're going to do in the case that we're told we can't do this, instead of waiting until finding out whether we can have this format or not? And or should be, to Lori's point, should we have that vote on whether we want all options before going to the Secretary of State?
Mr. Enworth.
I don't believe that that's actually a question for me. I believe it's a question that the council has to ask. Those are your options. Commissioner Casey is correct. You still need a majority vote to put each one of the options on the ballot. You would need a majority vote if you wanted to put both options on the ballot at the same time, if the Secretary of State agreed that that was an appropriate form for the question. If on the back end, neither one of the options received a majority vote, it doesn't go on the ballot. So those are your 3 possible outcomes. Whether or not the council wants to sit here and debate if one option over the other option doesn't work for the rest of the night is up to the council, or the pleasure of the council.
I also feel like we don't have agreed upon language for the ballot yet, so I'm not sure that we're quite ready for that, because the language as presented by Mr. Enworth still has some questions about it. We wanted to mill a few things, but I'm willing to do whatever we want to do. We're going to sit in the chairs we can for, and get it out the door. And I think I had some questions over here, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Dolan. Ms. Shaw.
Yeah, I go back to, we want a blessing from the Secretary of State, and if we don't get it, then we know that we have other options. But I think the important thing is that we need to know if we can put this forth the way that we had told people that we would. We can change our mind. But I just go back to just our original conversation, that just to getting approval and blessing from the Secretary of State to do it this way and decide if we want to do it that way. But at least know that that's on the table. So that's my thought on it.
Mr. Thielen? Oh, excuse me, Ms. Dolan was first, and then I'll take you, Mr. Thielen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just say, let's remember how we got where we are today. House Bill 547 went to the state legislature and was vetoed by the governor to bring it back to Butte to make this decision. And luckily enough, this year we have a study commission, so we were tasked with this issue. And for 18 months or a year and a half, we have been engaging the public in every which way, testimony, public hearing, all of it, with the understanding that we were giving and going to give the community option A, option B, trying to be as fair as we could to both the careers and the volunteers with their long-standing issues. And while it is conflicting and hard, I believe that if we were to ultimately say to the voters and to the taxpayers, well, no, we're not going to do that, I fear that it will immediately go to litigation because we're changing at the 11th hour what that looks like. I mean, we had a whole subcommittee, we met with the county attorney about these options, so I agree with the chair that we need to establish the structure first, see if it's okay with the Secretary of State, and then go from there. A, deal with the language and then vote on that, and hopefully we will have the fairest representation of all of the discussions we've had to both groups that have been unable to get to a resolution. And I think if we just limit it to just one thing, then either side, be it A or B, they're going to be devastated because we have just dropped the ball on those options.
I have Mr. Thielen, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Enruth, if that's okay.
Madam Chair, my question's actually for Matt. Do you have any idea on a time frame from the Secretary of State on this?
Commissioner Thielen, I'll get it to him right away in the morning, and I do have a direct phone number for one of their in-house counsel.
And Mr. Enruth, you had a comment?
Yes, I just had a comment with regards to everything that was said. I disagree with Commissioner Dolan. The reason I believe Commissioner Casey brought up her comment is because that's how it has been the whole time. While I understand that Commissioner Dolan has brought up that we want to be fair to everybody, I have made it clear on several occasions in here that you still have to vote for each option to be on the ballot. And I apologize, the sun's in my face. No, it's not. So with regards to the comment that litigation would ensue if one or the other was removed, I think if you went back and looked at all these commission meetings, that it's been clear throughout the past year that you have to have a majority vote to put them both on there. And so if that's, I disagree with Commissioner Dolan's comment, and that's, I believe Commissioner Casey brought hers up, is because that's also been discussed.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of us, the structural question kind of sets up the next questions in regards to where we need to go. So we do have a motion and a second to move this forward in a structural question for the Secretary of State. Is there any further discussion regarding moving this forward for the Secretary of State to consider? Okay, so I'll take our votes. I'll start with Ms. McCormick. Aye. Ms. Shaw.
Aye.
Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Steppen.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan. Ms. Casey.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So motion passes unanimously. Please get back to us as soon as you can, Mr. Enruth, with our decision.
I'll get it to them right away in the morning.
Okay, so with that, Mr. Steppen raised the question of if we wanted to deal with the other ones. I'm inclined to go ahead and adjourn and then bring all of them back as one. I think we need some time to think through things. We need a little bit of language massage maybe, but I'm open to what this commission would like to do. So please, push back of what you need to see or how you'd like to proceed. Ms. Shaw.
Just a question, when would our next meeting be? Is the 18th still set for the 18th, or?
Yeah, I think
that's when we would do?
Ms. Adams.
Sorry, just wanted to know how long we need to think about it.
So you do have an agenda out there to meet tomorrow, and that was sort of a placeholder if you wanted this discussion to go for 2 days. So I think the body needs to decide tonight if you want to meet tomorrow or if you'd like to wait and meet next Monday.
Mr. Thielen?
Madam Chair, I don't know if we really do need to meet tomorrow until we have an answer, unless we have an answer tomorrow from the Secretary of State. I don't see the need for it.
I believe I have several conflicts with tomorrow night as well. There were several folks that were not going to be able to attend tomorrow night, so I think perhaps we wait until the 18th and cancel tomorrow's meeting. Mr. Steppen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we make a decision on the 18th, and are we still falling within our timelines?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I would only then say that I think we're all under the same understanding that we need to come out of the 18th with decisions. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, we'll just sit in the chairs until we're done with it because we need to, right? That is the commitment we have made. And one of those decisions might be a very difficult decision to table if we can't move them forward as people want to, or we go with one or two, you know, whichever decision is. I think we make the commitment to be in the chairs as long as it takes to deliberate it. Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would suggest to the county attorney, thank you for putting this into their realm of decision-making tomorrow morning. I would ask you to tell the Secretary of State's office that we need an opinion ASAP, and then if you could email that to us, and then we could do the proper due diligence and be ready for discussion and vote on the 18th.
All right. Is there any other scheduled matters? I believe not. Mr. Enruth?
I will CC, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna lean back. I will CC Chairman Brandel in the email tomorrow. I won't CC everybody because I'll trigger open meeting laws, but that way we have the third party on it. Excuse me.
Thank you. All right, so we will cancel the meeting tomorrow night, Ms. Adams, if we can please do that. And then our next meeting will be on May 18th at 5 p.m. here. Mr. Thielen, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting, and everybody travel safe home.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Thank you all.